ask anybody's question but yours. You're an idiot. And really a disloyal person.
Because it is us three, I decided we should start off this podcast with a fun fact that is relevant to us three and potentially us three alone. Our favorite running back or backup running back now on the Syracuse Orange is Yassine Willis. His high school from New Jersey is St. Joseph Regional. Now, St. Joseph Regional provides a lot of actually notable athletic alumni, most notably for some people, the McCourty brothers, the Patriots brothers, Devin and Jason. For us three, there was one more person that is more notable than that. One Matthew Turner. And as usual, this is how we start the Disloyal Idiots podcast. Christian de Guzman here alongside Steve Heller and Andy Pregler, where we attempt to divert the conversation into international soccer whenever we can.
I mean, can Fran Brown coach men's soccer? Like, we only really need a coach every couple months for a few weeks. Like, is that something Fran can do on the side? Because at this point in time, anybody's better than the current option, or apparently Steve Cherundolo, who is the favorite to replace Greg Berhalter if he gets fired.
I wouldn't mind Dolo, but I also lived through watching Dolo play. So
yeah,
I'm factor as well.
Yeah, the Jurgen Klopp thing turns out was a false flag operation, and Cherundolo has been reported as the favorite to take over if Greg is indeed fired.
Men's national team coach.
Oh shit! I would love Coach Mack as the head coach.
It is out there in the wild now.
Jesse Marsh openly wanted this U.S. job and had to take Canada instead. Why? Well, why not?
I was gonna say, wasn't the fan favorite Bielsa, and so now we've got Bielsa versus Marsh potentially as a final option. So normal things happening here in the world of things we care about a lot.
I'm glad we were doing this at the beginning of the podcast because we usually save this for the end because it gives us a chance to talk about Miles Robinson.
Yeah, right now we're either scaring people off or now that you've turned it back around to Syracuse things, I think we might retain some people, but
it's minimal chance.
For anyone who didn't see, Miles was selected to the U.S. team, did not play during the Copa. However, he has been selected as one of and this is probably one of the reasons why he did not feature during the Copa, was selected as one of the over 23 players that is allowed to be on the U.S. roster for the Olympics. So they're likely using him as a locker room presence and solid center back option in the Olympics for the U.S. as they're allowed to take 3 over 23 players.
Well, let's remember, they're also bringing Walker Zimmerman, so they just might go with the defense wins championships mentality and play Zimmerman and Robinson as the center back pairing.
The U23 center back pool is pretty light, so it makes total sense why they would do this.
Is Cameron Carter-Vickers still under 23, or
what's that?
Is Cameron Carter-Vickers still under 23?
Jesus. I do not know.
Because that's like the one young center back I can remember right now, and that's
Chris
maybe
Richards,
it.
I think is finally aged out. Yeah. Who else is on the squad?
Yeah.
Vickers is 26.
So never mind.
Yeah, Scally's under, Lund is under, but they're both wide.
Yeah, those are wide guys, yeah.
Richards just aged out at 24. So, yeah.
I'm not... I don't love the fact that we have to go over age for the center back pool at the U.S. thing, but it is actually kind of nice that Robinson is going to get some time, because I do think that the crazy thing to remember is that he should have been the starting center back pairing for this Copa tournament. He was on that pace, 18 months ago? And then he pops his Achilles, and he has been a very, very good defender for Cincinnati FC this season, but he's not the same guy that was anchoring in Atlanta backline at a level where he was getting European interest. And I do feel like it is important for him to play high level, high competitive soccer, because that European boat has essentially passed him at this point in time, there's almost no chance that a European team will offer a high enough transfer fee that Cincinnati will let him go, especially because I believe he is a DP on Cincinnati. And there is the only other defender DP in MLS is Walker Zimmerman, which goes to show you the state of defenders in the U.S. men's national team pool. But also, you do not spend your DP slots in Major League Soccer on defenders unless they are expected to be game changers. And so I feel like Miles is now going to be an MLS guy for life. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to his national team hopes, he was on a trajectory to be better than that.
He was on a trajectory to be
really bad timing.
Yeah, he was on a trajectory to be a locked-in starter there. At this point, the way it's lining up, and if he continues in MLS, he'll probably just have to, continually fight for that spot or whatever.
Yeah.
There was a stretch where he was in Penn as one of the first names on that team sheet. So, the under 23 center back pool, you're looking at Jonathan Tompkinson, who's playing for Bradford City, and like Jalen Neal at LA, and maybe is Caleb Wiley a center back? Atlanta United, but he's also 19, so there's that. But either way,
and this is why they brought Walker Zimmerman and Miles Robinson.
Now, on the same front, when you move forward one position grouping, you have Gianluca Busio, Tanner Tessman, Jack McGlynn, Aiden Morris, Rokas Puchtas, Cole Bassett. Like, that midfield's pretty damn solid. Mm-hmm. And then Kevin Paredes, Cade Cowell, Taylor Booth, Paxton Aronson, Duncan McGuire, Griffin. Everybody who follows Q Soccer should remember Duncan McGuire from that. Was it Indy squad? Was he on Indiana?
It was the squad prior.
Yeah, he was Creighton.
Yeah, he was on Creighton in the semifinals.
Yeah, it was hoof it up to him and see what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Then Griffin Yao, and that's the rest of the squad's great if we can get a solid defense. I mean, even the wing defenders, you've got like John Tolkien. He should be solid there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
The Olympic soccer is weird. I think that's like the first thing that we should start off with, is that we're talking about a very weird tournament with very weird results. But I do
a glorified U23 tournament.
Yeah, exactly. But also, like, you look at the overagers, like Andre Lacazette is going to be one of the France over 23s.
Neymar last tournament.
Yes, they did, and it can be a lot. And the USA men's side has not had a ton of success in the Olympics, and I think it's exciting that
we haven't qualified for them in like 4 Olympics.
Yeah, that is true. Mm-hmm.
Hence, we have not had a lot of success at the Olympics in soccer. But I do think it's interesting to like kind of steering the conversation towards Syracuse Olympians. Like, track and field has had its fair representation for Syracuse. We've had some rowers go on both the men's and women's side. I believe we've had some women's soccer players go, not for USA, but for other countries, most notably Ireland and Canada. Those are all, and like, it's a tremendous achievement to be an Olympian in any sense of the word. But for the men's Olympic soccer team, it's very rare that a Syracuse player makes it, mostly because they don't typically take college guys. So that rules out most of the Syracuse roster. And then in order to be an overage guy, you have to be either a Neymar, a Lacazette, one of the like, hey, fringe national team player guys or core national team player guys. And that's not something that Syracuse has produced really ever on the men's side, at least for the USA, until Miles showed up. And we get this opportunity. I think it's really cool that he is going to have the opportunity to represent USA as an overager. He'll probably be starting every game. And like, there's it's going to be interesting to see who gets to wear the captain's armband, whether it's him or Walker Zimmerman. I think that there's there's an argument to be made that it is probably Walker Zimmerman, but they've
both worn the armband for the full national team.
That's what I'm saying. And they were both on the national team at the time that they were wearing the armband together. Again, the captain's a symbolic gesture, but like, we all know Miles really well. He is somebody who exudes captain energy at all times. And I think it would be really cool to have a Syracuse grad be the captain of the U.S. men's team at the Olympics. Like, that is not a small thing to have happened.
Hopefully that happens.
I know. Now we have to
but like you guys said, it's probably Walker.
I know. I'm a little bit upset about it, but I'm gonna accept it. But also,
course,
that's the extent of my knowledge of what's happening in Syracuse right now.
Well, there's a reason why I titled this podcast "The Hoops Empire Strikes Back," because this is your typical, time where hoops would like to dominate the headlines, especially with draft and summer league just happening. ESPN's page is nonstop Granny James. So if you've come for a reprieve from that, welcome. This will be yet another edition of why Syracuse didn't get a player drafted, which has unfortunately been a trend that Syracuse is looking to buck. The big news is obviously the summer league signings and who has joined in the summer league for the certain teams. Cole Swider has been performing very, very well for Miami and looks to be on a bench spot potentially in Miami. The other guys who have signed, Buddy Boeheim, no longer with the Pistons, has signed a summer league deal with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Judah Mintz and Jesse Edwards, unfortunately, did not get drafted. Mintz signing with the 76ers and Edwards signing a two-way deal with the Minnesota Timberwolves. So best of luck to those guys. But unfortunately, again, this is another summer, and I think we're now, if I recall seeing this stat on Twitter, we're in one of the longest stretches going straight years without a Syracuse player getting drafted. Not just in the first round, which is what I think most fans of Syracuse basketball are expecting, but just in general, we're in a long stretch of no Syracuse players actually even getting drafted.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean,
also Joe Girard went to the Toronto Raptors summer league team, I believe, as well.
He had to come back north. It's fine. It's mind-boggling to see where expectations went from so little as 5 years ago to where they're at now. And for Syracuse basketball to just want somebody to get drafted is mild insanity. I don't know if there's precedent for this at any stretch. Actually, there's not, because the Jim Boeheim era was the only era that existed during the draft era. So what is, I guess, what's the end game? Where are we? Who is the remotely? I guess Donnie Freeman is the only person that could potentially buck the trend next year. I mean, there's nobody else that jumps at me of, hey, he's going, unless somebody like really turns it on. There's nobody that really lights it up and says this guy's going to get drafted.
No, and what also is very frustrating on two fronts is that this was probably one of the weakest draft classes, not just in terms of star power at the top of the draft, but just holistically. In order to be a drafted player, you just need to prove that you could be a decent role player off the bench. Like, that was essentially the floor for getting drafted this year. And obviously Syracuse didn't have that, which is saying something. Next year, when you look at the draft, it is arguably already shaping up to be one of the deepest draft classes, not just in terms of star power at the top. Like, if you're drafting within the top 5, there's a good chance you are going to have, if not a perennial all-star and instant impact player available to you. But the rest of the draft is also incredibly deep when it comes to projected players who could turn into starting caliber guys. And so somebody whose ceiling is only solid role player is likely not to get drafted. So like when we're talking about Donnie Freeman, who I think has a ridiculously high ceiling, like there is a good chance that Freeman's ceiling is really useful NBA role player. That's not good enough to get drafted next year, which is, again, part of that's timing. But the other part of that, I think, does go to, Steve, something that you're kind of talking about here, where it is unprecedented that Syracuse has never had the consistency where this is new for us, in that in the ebbs and flows of the loaded drafts and the weak drafts, there's almost always at least one or two Syracuse players that project as really solid role player. example, the guy that always comes to my mind is Wesley Johnson, a guy who hung around in the NBA for so long and was really, really good at Syracuse and probably never the star player at Syracuse, but was able to get drafted and hung around the NBA for a really long time as a useful role player. Like that used to be standard on the Syracuse roster. And we can't even produce somebody like that at a consistent enough level that we know that, like, hey, we can talk about this one guy potentially going and getting picked up by an NBA team. I think that is the biggest indicator that I can say that like times have changed, where it's like, I'm dreaming of a Wesley Johnson type guy on this roster.
I mean, even though he's, maybe, but also even go like a step, a rung lower on the ladder, like Dion Waiters is a guy that, again, a guy that was a bench player for Syracuse, but again, stuck around the NBA for quite a long time. And so, I mean, maybe not as long as Wesley Johnson, but had a pretty decent length NBA career. And Syracuse can't even find those guys on a decent bench level right now, which is just unfortunate to just kind of reiterate what the strength of the program is right now. And maybe, in a couple of years, once Autry fully has his vision in place about how he wants to build this team, maybe that gets fixed. But right now, like you guys said, Donnie Freeman is probably your best bet at maybe getting a guy drafted, and he might be one of those guys who sees next year's draft class and sees the depth that Andy mentioned and says, well, maybe I'll run it back next year and maybe see if I can improve my draft stock then in 26 and take my chances there as well.
Well, and I guess that's right now he's projected as a first rounder, which if that happens, leave, go.
Yeah.
I don't care what you're doing. If you're
get out of here. Yeah.
Go make your like, shut up and take my money.
That's what Chris McCullough did. So
yeah, and he was better off for it because if you're a first rounder, the absolute bare minimum, and this is, what was it, 10 years ago I probably did this calculation, so it's got to be way higher now, was an absolute minimum guaranteed of like $2.5 million.
Yeah, and you take
You're going to make that money anywhere else in your life. Take that, go play for a year, and flip McDonald's or flip burgers at McDonald's for all I care. Like, you've made your bank. You'll be fine. It makes no sense for someone to stay in college if they have a $2.5 million paycheck sitting there staring at them. Go.
Yeah. And I think that for Donnie, it's going to be really interesting because we know that Autry is playing a system that probably is a little bit easier to sell at the NBA level as compared to insert everything you have to feel about the zone and whatnot. But I do think that it is interesting to think about this a little bit deeper in what do we want out of Donnie Freeman next year? Like, is the expectation that he is going to have to be the guy? Because the more and more I look at the roster, it feels like that's what's going to happen.
He's the only 4 on the roster. Right?
And are we asking our 4 to be our number 1 scoring option? Like, are we looking at him and saying, like, if you don't get 18 a game, we're in trouble?
Is he Rakeem Christmas? That is the question we're asking.
That's my biggest concern. And that Rakeem was an amazing Syracuse player, but was not. Yes. Mm-hmm. That was my senior year. So I have I'm tied to Rakeem. We came in at the same time and we left at the same time. And his senior year, like, again,
that was my freshman year.
Team was not going to play in the. God, why am I the one feeling old now? We were not going to make the tournament without an ACC tournament run. But Rakeem down the stretch was just manhandling everything the ACC had, and like that was awesome. But and again,
let's remember also that's also partially because Rakeem also didn't have McCullough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I think. Remember, that was also the season where the Spaham sanctions came out. So there was going to be an ACC tournament run anyway. But I think you saw like the quality of that team really started to dip after McCullough's ACL injury.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I'm
Mhm.
curious because I don't know. You guys may know better. What is Donnie Freeman's game? What is his strength? Like, does he want to be in the post? Because
I think he's still trying to figure that out, honestly.
right. So
Because
we're
he
not
has a
gonna have him in the post
yeah.
because you have a very big man down there.
Well, because he has abilities on both. He has abilities for both being a post guy and a stretch four.
Right.
So it's. I think that he's still trying to figure that out as well, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see what direction Autry wants to pull him.
Yeah.
Ironically, this kind of ties into this an interesting discussion that is related to Freeman because he's already gotten some experience of playing with professional players, and that was when he was with this year's Bahamas Olympic qualifying team for basketball.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the Bahamas just lost to Spain in the final qualifying round. I love the guys at Syracuse.com, but I found it really funny that the Spain player that they decided to highlight on that team was Willie Hernan Gomez. And maybe that's just me being ignorant of not knowing who else on Spain there is, but usually Spain has more firepower than Willie Hernan Gomez.
I mean, it's also the Olympic qualifying it's similar to sometimes soccer. They're not fielding a full roster during qualifying, but it does.
Yeah, you could say that, but remember, the Bahamas was fielding not only Freeman on the starting lineup, but Buddy Hield and DeAndre Ayton on that starting lineup. So
yeah,
he's got some experience playing with some top name players.
There ain't much on that squad. Usman
Oh,
Garuba,
really?
Golden State. Juan Nunez with San Antonio. Santi Almada with Memphis.
Oh, okay. Did I stand corrected?
Yeah. Rudy Fernandez is now
still there.
He's still there and is with Real Madrid now.
Shout out Rudy Fernandez. Holy moly.
He's hanging in there.
Because I remember the Spain days where like it was not just Rudy Fernandez, but the Saul brothers as well.
Yeah.
You know, trying to take it to the US in the late 2000s.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they seem to have come back to earth since then.
Okay.
So
yeah.
So this roster, I guess since we're in basketball, can we just discuss this roster and this roster breakdown right now? Because I still don't know what the hell to make of it.
Here we go.
So this will tie in nicely to after we do this roster breakdown with something else that may have an impact on how future rosters are built.
Oh boy. Also, we've been going for 23 minutes and haven't talked football at all, so this is weird.
Which is what the last
we mentioned
podcast is.
We mentioned Fran Brown.
Code. Yeah, okay. Yeah. There we go. Down in the post, you have Mr. Lampkin, who we talked about extensively last week. Large human being, will be wearing 44. I'm happy for him. He's going to fill a lot of space. You have Naheem McLeod still back, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's two very large human beings in the post.
Mm-hmm.
Your starter and your backup are not moving from the paint.
Yes.
So then you've got Freeman, who's Freeman.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else you are considering a 4 or able to throw down there? I mean, hypothetically, you go small ball and put Bell in at the 4?
If you put Chris Bell at the 4, I think
there's literally no one else on the roster that can play that part in the post. Yeah, I get it, but we're going to be forced into that situation at least once this year. I can promise you that. Yeah,
I'm not loving where this is going. I mean, it's.
I forgot about him coming in, but again, 6'7", 215, slightly
not a 4.
Not a 4. Yeah, I don't know. Those are the two guys listed as small forwards. I'm going by verbal commits because that's always the easiest for me to track.
Yeah.
Who do we even have at the? I mean, that's also our 3 roster. That's
So
also 3.
I have a post from earlier today in our Slack channel from Dom that lists out the list for the roster so far.
Where the
So
hell-
returning players: Kyle Cuff Jr.,
Yeah.
JJ Starling, Chris Bell, Naheem McLeod, Chance Rustry. Transfers: Eddie Lampkin, Lucas Taylor, Jair Davis, Jaquan Carlos. And rookies: Donnie Freeman, Elijah Moore. That right now is your Syracuse men's basketball roster for the 2024-25 season.
Right. And so what you're saying is my question was answered by the fact that there is nobody else over 6'7" on this team.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. I don't like this.
I'm just concerned because we are. Like, I'm not saying that like Zach Edey is changing the way that we're looking at basketball, but like basketball is slowly like college basketball is going back to the big men now that everybody's small. If you have a big dude who's just taller than everybody in the middle of the post, like you can dominate down there. And so the other option is that.
Hold on. We found out last year that's not true because we had someone who was taller than everybody on the court.
That is true, and he was not very good at everything else. But I'm just concerned that this team is going to rely so much on shooting. And man, I don't love that. Like, there's just something about like I look at UConn, who is essentially broken college basketball. They don't take mid-range jumpers. They either take threes or they are inside the paint making layups and dunks. And when I look at this team, all I see are jump shooters.
And again, just in general, that's how pro basketball is kind of played nowadays as well.
Yeah, and it's like it's the way basketball is moving, and the problem with it is that you can have jump shooters, you just have to be elite at it. And I don't know if anybody on Syracuse has the potential to be even like, I'm not talking NBA elite, but like college elite jump shooting is still really hard. And I don't see that ceiling here. So unless Autry is like grilling them on like new offensive sets, I'm just concerned that we're going to have the same issue that we had with last year's team, where unless you have insert best player take over the game, you're going to beat the teams that are worse than you, and you're going to lose to the teams that are better than you with no real middle ground in between, because you're not playing a style of game that allows you to essentially close that gap with the better teams.
Yeah. It was just really all you can say is that, yeah, it's unfortunate that it looks like this year is going to be another type of status quo year because of where Syracuse just kind of has been, and from where Syracuse has moved from Boeheim to Autry. Yes, the defense changed from zone to man, but at the same time, it almost feels like while Syracuse was better in transition, in a half-court setting, that felt like the same Syracuse basketball team that we've seen fail for the past 5 years.
Yeah, 100%. It was so what. Weirdly, I think I was explaining it to my wife at one point when we were talking about it. The thought that, like, she didn't watch much this year. She kind of gotten turned off by the past couple of years, and I was trying. Yeah, well,
yeah, same.
I was trying to explain how this year, even though it felt like more of the same, but also a change, and it was weird trying to explain that to someone.
Because it's the reasons I said. There was no zone, and there was transition. There was a plan for transition basketball.
Well, no. Again, there was no zone until there needed to be zone, and then
true. Yes. Yeah, but again, there was also a plan for transition basketball, and that was at least the identity that Syracuse tried to craft for itself.
Right.
But like I said, once teams stopped transition and forced Syracuse to settle in half-court sets. And once Syracuse, what we saw at the end of the year, start to get less confident in their transition basketball and stop the transition just to settle for the half-court settle down possession, it turned into the same basketball offense that we saw.
Right, it turned into Boeheim ball. Well, no, modern Boeheim ball, because there was a point where Jim played up-tempo running, and it was great to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And in all honesty, when this team was clicking, it was great to watch in that vein.
Yeah.
But also when you think about towards the end of the season, they were down again, similar to in past years, to no one on the bench. And you can't run and gun and play transition ball without any subs and without any legs. And it really showed. And, I'm not from this roster. I'm seeing, the potential for a more up-tempo game, but I'm not seeing the potential for a quality up-tempo game.
Maybe this is where my last conversation before our halftime break comes in. Because one of the moves that Syracuse recently made could be an interesting one depending on how it works out. Because on Monday this past week, July 1st, Syracuse announced that it hired a general manager for basketball. Alex Klein, who is a former Syracuse grad and a former scout for the New York Knicks, signed with the team as a general manager. And a quote from Adrian Autry, as posted in the article that James wrote on our sister site News Magician. Autry says, as we look to compete at the highest levels, bringing in Alex as our general manager position is critical. This move aligns with our goal of being at the forefront of player evaluation, development, and retention, recruiting, and name, image, and likeness in college basketball. It'll help Syracuse compete at the national level. So could this be a move to potentially help with that type of roster building that Syracuse maybe at this point seems like it needs?
I do not want to pass this idea off as my own because it's not my own. Split Zone Duo was talking about this in the context of football, because when you look at the way that the sporting calendar is set up for collegiate athletics right now, with the transfer windows, with the commitment dates, with the early commitment windows, you are at this point in time running a roster that has more transitional fluidity than the professional sporting ranks. Like even soccer, that has probably the most player movement of any sport in the world, only has designated times where that movement can happen. And in college, you are looking at multiple periods of time where your entire roster could theoretically flip. And a football coach cannot manage that. We've already decided that at the professional level, a head coach outside of Bill Belichick can't really do that and also coach the team full time. Like these are two separate jobs. And I think at the collegiate level, like their argument that they was making is that the GM position is going to become a new pipeline for executives. Like when you look at the way that baseball has worked, it has been such a closed off circle of like Harvard and Yale business school grads who played sports somewhere and then went to Harvard and Yale business school and then, got into these baseball front offices. But there's no real minor league system where they can learn how to be a front office other than working for another Major League Baseball team. And their argument was like, you're going to see with football and basketball specifically, this is going to become a path for a professional GM job because you're asking them to do the same things that you need to do at the pro level in terms of money management with your NIL cap and how much you can spend. With the new NCAA rules that have come out that now limit the amount of spend that a college can pay its athletics programs as a whole, you now have multiple GMs that could be negotiating different amounts of money allocated to their programs. And third, and most importantly, like Christian, to your point, this is now truly a talent evaluation and development buck stops here position. And those skills are insanely transferable to the professional level. But now you get to do it at the collegiate level where there is just as much pressure, just as much eyeballs. And now in the case of a lot of sports, just as much money flowing in as there would be at the professional level. And I think it's going to be really fascinating because Klein is somebody who has been on the rise ever since he was at Syracuse. And it's great that he has a Syracuse background. I think it's incredibly foolish to think that Klein is going to be in this position for more than 5 years. This is clearly a stepping stone job, and I think that that's a good thing. But what I think is going to be most interesting is going to be that negotiation. We've not quite seen Syracuse football and basketball exist at the same level before. Now they are. And Fran Brown, again, we don't know what's going on the football side as much as we do on the basketball side. It seems as if Fran Brown and his staff are approaching this a lot more collectively than what basketball is doing, where they're putting Klein at the top of the food chain here. But they are now essentially going to Syracuse and saying, I believe it's next year, not this upcoming season, but the season after, where the NCAA ruling says it's $25 million that you can allot specifically for player spend, whatever that is, whether that's scholarships, whether that's actual cash in hand you give them. You have $25 million across your entire athletic department. What is that breakdown between football and basketball? How much does Klein have to play with versus how much does Fran have to play with? How much does our NIL collectives kick into each sport? I think these are going to be really interesting discussions to see play out, and how Klein is able to navigate that with Syracuse basketball is going to determine how long he's here. Because if he does well, he will get an assistant NBA GM job very quickly, which I think will mean that Syracuse basketball is back into the tournament regularly and back competing in the second weekend in the Sweet 16 and beyond. But this is kind of new and uncharted territory for college sports in general. And I think Syracuse basketball being at the forefront of this is a net positive.
2 things to add on to that conversation. One, football kind of already has a jump start on that because Fran has already hired, or someone in the football department has already hired a GM for the football team. That's Nate McNeil. And he was someone the media actually got to talk to during spring practice. Again, revolutionary idea of talking to coaches and support staff and getting to interview them. 2, the other thing that might make Klein very successful, asterisk here, maybe, because for Andy and I, Klein is also a Newhouse grad with a BDJ degree.
He's pretty good when it comes to talking to the media. I'm
a Newhouse guy here. I have nothing. I believe that the concept has been proven to be successful in various other sports that you see it implemented in, i.e., look at European soccer, where they did the same thing and pulled the team building aspect away from the managers, and you end up with managers and coaches, and it drastically changes things and has, improved some teams, and bad hires have dropped others. But still, there's too much going on in modern college athletics for someone to handle all of the coaching duties as well as the duties of what a GM would do. So I don't see anything that could hypothetically be a downside of this.
You know what there's no downside to? Home Field Apparel are our halftime sponsor. A little bit late in the podcast, but always a great time to shout out our friends at homefieldapparel.com. If you want the comfiest throwback collegiate gear of your choice, like their newest edition of the University of North Florida, you can go to homefieldapparel.com and use the code NUNES23, that's NUNES23 at checkout for 10% off your very first purchase at homefieldapparel.com.
The thing that I think is comfortable that is not a t-shirt or a hoodie, but I'm enjoying about Syracuse sports right now is seeing Syracuse football in the top 50 of recruiting rankings very comfortably. Like, do I think that we're going to continue to be a top 25 rated class? Probably not. But for those that have not been aware, ESPN has been keeping up with the college football recruiting rankings 24/7. Obviously, does it 24/7. That's why they're pretty good at this. Syracuse is still a top 30 recruiting class consensus. ESPN has us a little bit higher than 24/7 does at the moment. There are, I believe, Syracuse missed out on both July 6th recruits, like the big 4 stars. Correct me if I'm wrong here, Christian, because I think you follow this more than I do, but we did not get either of the guys who were committing on July 5th or July 6th.
I did not see any mention of that. So
yeah, there were two players that were 4 stars that were Syracuse was one of the final 3 or 5, and they did not pick it. Even without those guys, still have a top half of the ACC class, top 30 class nationally. I think Kevin was the one that mentioned it in our Slack channel. We're probably going to round out this class with a bunch of 3 stars. But I think this is an interesting time to kind of talk about the Syracuse recruiting class in the sense of Fran basically took the first 3 months of his momentum as a head coach and said, let me build the best recruiting class that Syracuse has ever had. And is probably going to follow through on that, which is kind of crazy that he was able to do it in that short a window.
And not only that short of window, and I keep on mentioning this, I'm going to sound like a broken record for people who tuned into the podcast last week or just in general during this cycle that Fran Brown has been head coach. But for him to also do it this early in a season, because again, we're usually talking about recruits, the 3 of us, in October and November. And usually we're spending a lot of time on the podcast when we're not reviewing the previous football game. We're usually spending a lot of time on the podcast actually talking about the specific guys that have actually come in and recruited and that have decided to commit to Syracuse. Just in general, we haven't done that with pretty much a ton of these guys. Just mainly because they've come so quickly and so fast and have committed this quickly and this fast to Syracuse, which is just unprecedented in any modern Syracuse recruiting style.
Yeah, it's crazy to see what's happened. We've said it 8,000 times already in the half a year, and it's
we say it 8,000 times because it bears repeating. Because I don't think people have fully grasped how just insane this is for Syracuse fans.
Every time we look it up, I'm like, holy shit, there is no way. Like, I mean, in all honesty, my brain still goes back to like Isaiah Williams is currently a 26 commit. There's no way we actually land him. I'm telling myself that. But he's a 26 and he's the second highest rated kid that's ever committed to Syracuse. Like, what are we doing here, Fran? But even if he rounds this class out with 20 or with 3 stars, he's still in a better spot than when he got here. He's landed the plane on transfers. He's kind of rated the ship on a lot of different things. I know he had a couple of decommits. A couple of them seemed like they were good, legit reasons. Like weren't, whether it's non-quals or going a different route or whatever. We'll find out at some point. We may never know, but they, he's working to backfill those spots, and right now everything is looking like it's turning up Millhouse for reporting to camp in the fall.
And again, this is what I said last week when we talked about this with just Steve and I, but just the sheer number of people that have committed to Syracuse. This is easily, from recent memory, just based on recruits alone, the biggest class that Syracuse has ever had in a recruiting class. And that's not counting in the potential transfers that Fran might bring in the offseason between 24 and 25. Just based on the recruits alone, this outnumbers any class that is combined recruits and transfers in Syracuse history.
Yeah, I'm genuinely amazed at how quickly he changed the narrative around recruiting. And there have been some stories coming out that it's obviously been a combination of new culture, new ambition, targeting specific geographic areas. It seems like Fran is really leaning into certain familial and community building aspects that other coaches were maybe not leaning into as hard of. But I feel like we are at a point, and this is probably the hottest take thing that I'm going to say about Fran Brown this season. I feel like the Fran Brown experiment is already a success in that you hired an expert recruiter, and with the mentality that everybody else had of you cannot recruit at Syracuse. And he's already proven that that is false. So even if Fran Brown is not a good X's and O's coach, and Christian knows how he can segue this into our next topic, even if he is not a good, even if the next coach after Fran is not a good X's and O's coach, you have already debunked the myth of you cannot recruit here because Fran showed you that you can recruit here. So that means that moving forward, any coach who's standing up and saying like, oh, Syracuse is impossible to recruit at, that is an excuse for X, Y, and Z, because Fran was able to prove that you can go into New Jersey and pry kids away from Rutgers or the other Northeast schools. You can set up a recruiting base that is predominantly Northeast while still going out and getting Georgia and Florida-based talent to supplement the roster. You can do all the things that everybody else said was too difficult. You just have to be extremely strategic about the way that you're going about it. So not to say that it's easy to recruit at Syracuse, it's just that it requires a bit of recruiting strategy, which means that you either need to have that strategy or need to hire somebody with that strategy. Because turns out that building a coaching staff, kind of a skill that turns out one guy had, and his name was Doug Marone, and he was here so quickly in the grand scheme of college football coaches.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a segue, but I have a similar hot take. And this might be a hot take that is hotter than Andy's. I feel like what Fran Brown has been for football is what I think a lot of people expected Adrian Autry to be for basketball, and it just hasn't worked out the same way.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think anyone who had looked at it objectively without orange-tinted glasses would not have made that mistake, but also I understand why people did, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like
I think Syracuse men's basketball was always going to be in a tough situation about who was always going to replace Boeheim.
Oh, we went over it before when it happened.
Yes.
It was effectively what happened to Man United when Ferguson retired.
Yeah.
Like David Moyes was set up to fail, and effectively Adrian Autry was set up to fail. And
because
he turned his first season into a success story by all metrics.
Yeah. But still hasn't risen Syracuse basketball up to the point
Right.
that you would expect it to be for a Syracuse basketball program. It hasn't rebounded and recovered like Duke and North Carolina has when their legendary coaches have retired.
The basketball program didn't rebound? Wait, a Syracuse basketball program didn't rebound? Really?
Really shocking to hear. I know it's incredibly shocking to hear. I don't know how you could ever come to that conclusion.
In other news, grass is green.
And water is wet.
Yeah. On the flip side, Fran Brown, like at least from his standpoint too, Andy, you've been around long enough to understand. Christian, you know from past hearing about it, but like the cupboards were not left remotely as bare for Fran as some previous coaching changes. Like there were at least some talent. There were at least a lot of talented kids that Dino brought in, and the level of player was at a certain point. Yes, Fran, retrofitted it around what he needed, but it wasn't like when Schaefer left and Dino took over, or when Robinson left and Marone took over, of this needs to be a complete overhaul, gut, like studs up rebuild. This at least was a stepping stone in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that there's the studs up approach was something that I thought was going to happen here. And that just wasn't what that just wasn't what Fran needed to do. And it's going to be, I think that this is going to be where the team is really interesting. And we're going to probably talk about this more on another show, but like the preseason expectations are starting to come in. Like we're starting to see like intelligent people. Like I have the Phil Steele guide right next to me right now. Bill C has done his ACC preview and has Syracuse in there. We're starting to see guys who know college football preview Syracuse, and the consensus is there is a path here for them to make a bowl game, and that should be considered a success. And that feels diametrically at odds with the hype that is around this program right now. That is in itself a ridiculous conversation to have that we will dive into more. But I do think that the optimistic / positive glass half full spin on that is Fran Brown did such a good job that in a situation that most people would logically say, look, you should be happy to make a bowl game, Fran has raised the expectations to a level that is a lot above that. Whether that's realistic or not.
Yeah, that sucks for him. Other side note, you were talking about the hype and levels of engagement with the program right now. They need to make sure that they capitalize on that for the rest of the summer, and especially once camp starts up again. Because I know when things were going down in the spring, the needle was never higher. And I feel like at this point it's waning a little just because we haven't heard anything or there's been nothing going on. And that's the nature of the ebb and flow cycle of college athletics. But, you know, at the same time, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They kind of botched the season ticket rollout. And I got close to my old seats, but like there is apparently a lot more demand at present for tickets compared to what there was. Just anecdotally by what I saw when I, as a season ticket holder for a decade plus, was, you know, pushed back to. So there's definitely a lot of interest, a lot of hype that hopefully doesn't go waning, and that they can capitalize on once they start reporting and, you know, things start coming out of camp.
I will tell you that once I get the email of when camp starts.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, I think it's actually really funny that you bring that up, Steve, because we've got a few minutes left here on the show, but I do think that one of the things that's going to start the college football hype cycle is when EA college football drops in a couple of weeks.
And again, Syracuse was basically an experiment of what happens when Dynasty Mode when you choose the recruiting archetype as your coach.
Yes, and it turns out you can do it. And I do think that this is, I think that if Syracuse is smart, like Syracuse is a program that if you want to like create your own custom Big East conference, or you want to, take over a team that's not going to be easy in dynasty mode, like Syracuse is a great example of that. And all of those things should be leaned into by the Syracuse football, social media, PR, communication staff.
That's what I'm doing.
Well, yeah, because like at the end of the day, like this starts the hype cycle for the season so much earlier than waiting for fall ball to come around and then having your normal grind of like daily updates, injury updates, practice grainy film updates. Obviously, we'll have more access this year than we've ever had before, which is going to be great and fantastic. But at the end of the day, come August 15th, people are going to be like, when are we playing a game? When are we playing a game? And it's still going to be a few weeks away. All of this is to say, I think that there's a tremendous opportunity with this video game release coming out for Syracuse to start that hype cycle and re-engage the fan base in a positive manner, as Syracuse is tailor-made for the things that we love about this game. And also, as somebody who is a big soccer fan, plays Ultimate Team on EAFC, I am intrigued. I did the pre-order, and you get a campus legend, like guaranteed. Like you get to pick your school and you get a campus legend automatically for your ultimate team when you pre-order them, like, what does the campus legend lineup for Syracuse look like? It's probably going to be tied into the NFLPA licenses that EA has. Like, this is going to be a really fun time that if Syracuse is smart, like, let's start engaging alumni, which is something Fran's been trying to do for a while now. And I do think that there's still work to be done in that area when it comes to alumni connection with the fans, not just the program.
So Andy's going to be our ultimate team reporter.
I had a full Arsenal ultimate team going for a while there before, before the power creep came in and made that team obsolete. So yes, absolutely. If I can get a full Syracuse team, get Mackey at tight end, get Dwight Freeney at defensive end, McNabb or McPherson at quarterback, one of them, I'll run 3 running back sets. I don't care. Like, give me Ernie Floyd.
Zaire at linebacker. Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool ways that you can do this. I will gladly take over that responsibility. But I do think that this is going to be an opportunity that we shouldn't waste.
Why it'd be fun.
I mean, gosh, there's the Syracuse alumni team. We have put out so many good players to the NFL, guys. It's amazing the history of this program, and we need to take advantage of it.
And at least Fran is doing that.
Yeah.
Or at least attempting to. Because again, as you said, and as many people have seen online, engagement with alumni has never been at a higher level. And I think that will hopefully continue with things like EA College Football 25 coming out and things like that, as well as Fran continues to learn more about the program as well. And just in general. We also need to decide what we're doing for our Connected Dynasty.
This is true.
Are we going to do team builder? Are we actually going to pick teams? This will be interesting.
My brain, if we pick teams, I'm sticking with Louisiana Tech. I think that's where we determined I was last week. So
I know, Andy, like you said, you've laid claim to North Texas. So
give me Mean Green or give me Wavy McWave Face, and Tulane will be wearing retro throwbacks every single week. Do not care if it's green on green. Like, we are wearing that. We are wearing the throwback Tulane logo.
Because if we're sticking with Group 5 schools, I'm thinking Charlotte will be mine.
There you go.
Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, I'm a big fan of where we're going with EAFC. I think that they're just I have high expectations.
Indeed. I'll do my best as well to fit in like multiple Syracuse dynasties, one for like journalistic purposes and one for single player purposes, because there will definitely be like a lot of sims that I'll be doing once I learn the team about theoretical scenarios that Syracuse can find themselves in and things like of that nature.
It's going to be so much fun, guys.
It really is. I'm very disappointed I missed that pod where you guys waxed poetic on it.
Yeah, that was fun. Well, I'm so glad because like more and more, because as more and more information is coming out, it just goes to show you like the team that EA, one of the rare EA wins is that the team that EA put out for this game has actually like been focused on making just a really good game. Been focused on like taking the elements that people love, not just in college football, but also in older NCAA college football games, and either enhancing them, bringing them back, whatever you could think of, in order to replicate the feeling and pride that people get from college football more so than you get from pro football. Because, and like, they're inherently different games because of just the atmosphere that you get in between pro football and college football. It's one of the big reasons why people love college football more so than pro football, at least in some cases, mine included. I'm much more of a big college football fan than pro football fan. And a lot of that has to do with tradition, atmosphere, things like that. Side note, Syracuse needs to build tradition. Well, topic for another day. But it's it just feels like the hype is being matched based on, you know, the not just the nostalgia, but the good feelings that people get by supporting their school, supporting underdog schools, things like that. it's a good time to be a college football fan, and it will be exciting to see how Syracuse ties into that fold.
Absolutely.
Concur.
We are less than 10 days from early release.
Cannot wait. Honestly, it's gonna be a great time. I have a camping trip this weekend, and then I come back and I am nestled in my Brooklyn apartment for long enough to just add me. We'll share our gamer tags once the game drops and play me. Beat
yes.
You will defeat me, and I am very bad. But
you will also defeat
just
me.
Play.
I am horrifically worse, but we shall discover that. This will be great because the three of us are admittedly bad at this game. So it will be a battle to see who is the most bad at said upcoming game. I do have one final question to close out this pod and tie it back to the beginning of the conversation that we started this entire thing. Andy, are you one of the reasons why the U.S. men's national team lost a footballing game this past couple of weeks?
Guys, I am 0 for 2 when going to USMNT national team games, and both games have led to the downfall of the program. The first game that I went to, first ever game that I went to as a USMNT fan, well, I've been a fan forever, but like first game I went to was the Costa Rica World Cup qualifying game in Red Bulls, where I sat next to Alexi Lawless and Stu Holden in the American Outlaws section. One of the coolest moments of my life, like by far and away. We just got absolutely manhandled that game. The ride home on the path then to the subway was probably one of the saddest trips that I've ever taken, and that includes so many walks back from Syracuse after the Dome, after being sweaty and being in auto for an extended period of time. And now I went to the Panama game in Atlanta. Shout out to everybody in Atlanta for making it welcoming and whatnot. But yeah, the problem is that I really like going to U.S. men's soccer games. They are a tremendous time. Again, I think it would be remiss if I didn't call out that the whole reason that I am this level fanatic and tied into the Outlaws is because of Mr. Steve Haller in 2015. So this is all your fault, Steve. So I'm going to pass the buck and blame to you, Mr. Invite him out to the American Outlaws bar. What could be the worst that could happen? This is the worst that could happen.
Here we are. All of that led to us losing to Panama.
It's good that we have traced the roots, and so now we know that Steve is to blame for all of this.
I brought my Syracuse scarf to Atlanta. I'm a member of the Brooklyn AO, but I have the Syracuse scarf, and I brought the Syracuse scarf because that's the one. I always bring the Syracuse one.
That's awesome. Absolutely awesome.
Well, as always, as conversations have diverted from Syracuse to international soccer and EA College Football 25, this is what you tune in for on the Disloyal Idiots podcast. Thank you all for watching on YouTube, Twitch, or Twitter on the live stream Sundays at 8 p.m. You can damn well be sure that once EA College Football 25 launches, we will do our best to try and show you our horrific gameplay and possibly Dynasty Sims as well, based on what we like/don't like about the future that Syracuse football may entail. If you're listening on your podcast platform of choice, thank you as always for giving the podcast a listen. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe, leave a comment so that we can trick the algorithm and the almighty AI into expanding the Ottoman Empire. I can't wait for virtual football. And I think a lot of you can agree with that as well. And you can always say
someone's shooting fireworks outside of my building right now. So
the July 4th weekend is about to end. And in that case, we can all say, go Orange.
Go Orange.
Fire Gerber Halter.